You're watching the Chaos Protocol on Transplanar RPG, an all-transgender, people-of-color-led dark fantasy TTRPG show set in an original non-colonial, anti-Orientalist multiverse. If you like what you see, please consider pledging to our Patreon to support the show and get access to a patron-only after-show, early podcast episodes, GM notes, character sheets, and even the chance for your tabletop OC to cameo in our series. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy. The Chaos Protocol is a dark fantasy series that may contain content that is triggering for some viewers. Content warnings for this episode include vampirism, death, blood, gore, food and eating, tobacco, complex relationships, romance, flirting, sexual innuendos, and references to substance use, fire, divine cannibalism, and arranged marriages. Arc 3, Episode 13, In a Coffin of Lead. From Praying Beside the Teeth That Killed Me by Connie Chang. Strike Team Nova, welcome to Downtime. In Court of Blades, between your errands and moments of free play, your coterie spends its time at liberty, attending to personal matters, various needs, and side projects. These comprise your downtime activities. Each of you gets 2 downtime activities. During times of war, you only get 1. That's not relevant right now. Each additional activity beyond 2 costs 1 influence, of which your coterie currently has 0. Also not relevant right now. Downtime activities may include roles, just like regular actions, and you get to take a +1d to your pool if a friend is helping you in this downtime activity. After you roll, you can spend influence to improve the result level by 1, but again, none of you have any influence, so don't worry about that yet. As for the downtime activities you have access to, there are 7 of them, and they are: 1. Slake your thirst. This lets you reduce your thirst at the risk of overindulging. 2. Acquire assets. This lets you gain access to the resources of your house. But given that Nova doesn't formally claim a house yet, this activity is barred from you for now. 3. Start or advance a long-term project. This covers a wide variety of projects like researching a ritual, investigating someone's secret, gaining someone's trust, etc. 4. Reduce exposure. This means you go around Inferno making amends, hiding evidence, or silencing gossip to reduce your coterie's exposure track. Looking at you, Xainan. 5. Recover. Because you are vampires, you automatically reduce 1 tier of physical harm at the end of each session, which all of you have been doing up until this point, as long as you're not in combat. But if you'd like to reduce social harm or expedite the recovery of your physical harm, you can perform this downtime activity. 6. Train. This lets you gain XP. And finally, 7. Perform a ritual. This is a special downtime activity, as magic in Inferno is not what you're used to, of course. But if you ever find yourself wanting to learn or perform a ritual, this is the activity to undertake. Now, before we learn who's doing what and when, I'd like to introduce a very special long-term project that is shared by your coterie right now. This project is called The Fate of Inferno. Like every long-term project, it has a project clock, which tracks its progress. Once all wedges on this clock are ticked, the project is complete. Typically, a long-term project clock spans 4 to 6 wedges. This one has 16. You can tick wedges on this clock by meeting or deepening your bonds with important people in Inferno, make note of this, and by learning new or important information about Inferno. Simple enough, right? You can tick this clock during free play, during an errand, or during downtime as a dedicated downtime activity to advance a long-term project. When all 16 wedges are ticked, then the fate of Inferno will be revealed. That's all. Now, let's get started with Xainan. The Lazy Bear Pub and Grill is an old diner on the fringes of the culinary district that looks torn straight from a 70s newspaper clipping. Inside, we see tiled floors, plaster walls, wooden booths, and the sweet, sweet stench of hand-rolled cigars. The bell above the door sings as you saunter in. You see a handful of Twilight customers huddling in booths or crouching on stools at the bar, nursing mugs of strong tea and picking over perfectly fried youtiao. There are vampires here, too. You can tell instantly, like something igniting in your blood. One of them catches your eye, an older black stud sitting in a corner booth. Her dark skin burns with a warm undertone. She has a medium-length frohawk that protrudes above a black bandana around her forehead, gashed with red designs to resemble claw marks. The rolled-up sleeves of her denim jacket reveal muscled arms covered in colorful tattoos. She has a slit in her eyebrow and wears these long, loose-fitting corduroy cargo pants. This woman has cracked open a window and is smoking a cigarette. She's reading a newspaper called The Inferno Daily, and aside from a brief glance in your direction with faded gray eyes, she doesn't really seem to care about you. As for Anugata, you don't see her here immediately, but you do hear signs of her. Somewhere in the back, presumably from the kitchen, you hear old fuzzy speakers blasting a hip-hop song with a lot of bass and a lot of drums. This is where Ro told you the meeting would be set up, of course. So, how do you make your presence known in the Lazy Bear Pub and Grill?
Xainan saunters in, and what would normally be his very even cowboy swagger, there is a slight hitch to it, since part of the reason he's even here is because he may or may not have been hit by and or hit a vehicle in the high-speed chase that culminated in damage to Anugata's bike. So he unevenly cowboy swaggers in. Definitely looks too long at the person in the corner, removes his hat, inclines his head to her first, and seeing the disinterest, turns to the counter. And Connie, I have a question for you. Is there a bell?
There is not.
Xainan sidles up to the counter, puts his hat flat down on the counter, risking whatever might be there on the surface of it, getting on the brim of his beloved hat, and he just sits and looks to see if maybe he can see a sign of life.
So this diner setup, there's no one at the bar. There's like one other person at the end of the bar who's just like hovering over a mug of very strong coffee and doesn't look at you. But you can see kind of like an open window into the kitchen where the music is coming from. You see some like steam rising, and then sure enough, you see a figure cut across the window holding a plate of a deliciously constructed sandwich. Anugata. She has a well-fitting white t-shirt on underneath an apron, and is just wearing these like dark wash jeans and these work boots. And she kind of calls out, "Hey, I got someone's club sandwich here," and then her eyes fall on you.
Howdy.
You know, I was
Not my
expecting you to be here because of that text I got from Rhododendron, and no, this is not your sandwich. And you're not getting anything on the house. Not tonight, not ever.
Understood.
You see a regular stand up from a booth, looking kind of furtively between the two of you, and go behind the bar themselves and grab the sandwich. There's like no server here, so they grab the sandwich and they bring it back to the booth themselves and they start eating it. Anu kind of leans her elbow on the kitchen counter, looks over at you. "So, I assume you're here to make amends."
I'm here to do whatever you think is making nice.
You know, let's play a little game. much do you think I had to spend on repairs to Moxie because of what you did? How many yen? Come on. Name a figure.
2,000?
2,000? Are you insulting me? Do you mean to imply that Moxie's parts only cost 2,000 apiece?
Listen.
Try 7, pretty boy.
Sure. What can I do to double that?
What can you do indeed? Let me think. She makes a big show of kind of swinging her arms, and she goes out of the kitchen. She leaves the kitchen, comes around, and stops behind the counter. So now there's just the bar between the two of you. Crosses huge muscled arms over a massive chest and says, "Kiss my boots."
And Xainan isn't looking away because he's ashamed. He flushes just a little bit of what you might call a vampire's blush as this twice dead man peels himself away from the bar, leaving his hat behind. And that uneven gait walks around the edge where that person went around to go get their sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
And Xainan stops directly in front of Anugata. Has a very brief flash of an actual smile before he, groaningly, gets down on the ground, laughs a little, and doesn't even think about where the boots have been, how many things might have spilled on them in this kitchen alone. Plants a not inexperienced hand on the ground and kisses Anugata's boot.
Huh. Oh, you gangly fuck. Get up.
And Xainan rolls back onto his heels and then stands pretty promptly.
I can't
I'm here to
believe you
make
actually
good.
did that.
I've done worse.
I can tell. Huh. I wonder what else I could put you through. But I'm not gonna yank your chain much longer. I've got a few questions for you, Xainan Esch. I don't think that kiss is enough to make good on Moxie's repairs. You're gonna need to do a lot more than that before I'm satisfied. Questions first, though. You're muted.
Xainan stands up. All right. And instead of going back around to sit in the chair, leans against the counter like he belongs there.
Question number 1. What's your deal with House Thrakar? You working for them?
Trying to make good. Rhododendron is doing me a favor by squaring things with you and Diablo.
Seems like it. You claim them now?
No, not meaningfully.
So a little trial run, huh? See if you're gonna replace their little errand girl, Ren Shimizu.
That isn't my intention. I'd be curious to know what you know about Ren Shimizu.
I'd be curious to know if Rhododendron's gonna dress you up like her too. Put your hair in a ponytail.
I promise it doesn't look that good.
I don't know. I can kind of picture it. I see. Alright, question number 2. What's with your crew?
We're new in town. Close-knit. But trying to figure this place out.
4 brand new vampires rolling into town, saving the littlest spider at a bloodbath, which, by the way, very difficult invitation to secure, kicking up a stink. So what's your angle? You want to be big players in this town? Think cozying up to the spiders is gonna get you to the top?
I don't have those kinds of aspirations. Just looking out for me and mine. Security, you know. Little connection here, little ingratiating there.
The thing about Inferno is this is a city you can remake yourself in. Your past doesn't matter. What matters is how you treat people in the present. That's gonna determine your future.
I've been remade a few times. Doesn't scare me.
That what happened to your face?
Believe it or not, I got hit in the head by a hammer. Just decided to keep it.
I can believe it. I believe you're the type of guy that pisses a lot of people off.
I have had that effect. Yes.
So you're here to make good with the bears. By kissing my boots and doing whatever I tell you. What else are you here for, Esch?
Have a good time, if that's not apparent. I like being a vampire.
Take other people's bikes for a joyride too? That your definition of a good time?
In my defense, I thought it was someone else's. Little bit of luck of fate.
Someone else's, huh? You know why I keep Moxie idling when I just have to duck in to grab something?
Probably because most people are not as foolish as I was.
Exactly. Everyone in Inferno knows that that's my fucking bike. But you know, I know what it's like to be new somewhere. We all started somewhere. I'm not an unreasonable woman, Esch. I'm willing to let bygones be bygones as long as they're rectified, but here's the thing. And she takes a step forward toward you, lumbering over you like multiple heads taller than you. Shadow falls over you. You say you're just looking out for your own. So am I. What's the cost of that to you? You gonna throw other people's loved ones under the bus just so your mouths are fed?
I don't want to make more enemies. I got plenty of them. What I want is to have a place here where I can conduct my business without stepping on other people's toes. That's all.
Xainan, it's time to roll to reduce your exposure here. So this is a downtime activity. When you wish to reduce your coterie's exposure, say how you go about making amends, hiding evidence, or intimidating the waggiest tongues. We've already seen what you've done here. We're going to see how effective it is. Then make an action roll. What skill would you like to use?
Xainan is working very hard, I think, to charm his way through the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say probably consort.
Consort, socializing. Love it. So how many pips do you have in consort?
1.
1 pip. I'm going to say your position here is risky. It's risky. Your effect will be standard. So roll 1d6.
That's a 5.
Okay, so a 4 or a 5 means you get to reduce your coterie's exposure by 2. Yay! Good job. What are you guys at now?
2.
2. Okay. All right. That's like a manageable amount of exposure.
Yeah.
Sure. So Xainan, as Anugata's arms are crossed looking down at you, you seem that she's a little mollified, a little satisfied with what you've said. It seems that you are authentically trying to make good here, and everything you've said hasn't pinged any red flags for her. She's probing you, and you're holding your own, and you're being fairly honest here. All right. Fine. Now get in the kitchen and start washing some dishes.
Oh, that's all? I can do that.
You haven't seen these dishes.
Alright.
Lumièra!
And
We got to Inferno University. It is a sprawling expanse of green in the heart of historic Inferno, filled with old buildings that boast Gothic stone decor and huge vaulted windows reminiscent of cathedrals. Outside of these buildings, the green bustles with students coming and going from night classes. Students, including you, Lumièra. Lumièra, as always, you're late. 15 minutes late to be exact. It took a long time to get here, and there was a lot of traffic to get to your psych lecture, which takes place in one of these gorgeously designed ancient buildings. But you've got no time to appreciate the architecture here. In fact, you have no time at all. So tell me, how do you bustle across the green into the building and into the lecture hall?
I think it's very similar to Lumièra rushing to Artemis's office right before she gets a new Mayday mission. It's just hauling ass in the most polite, upstanding way, just perfect posture, booking it right through, doing like the little ADHD turns like around people, like just kidding corners, but like not exactly, just sharp turns directly into the building.
You book it into the building, turns. Beautiful architecture. You see vaulted ceilings, like statues. Everything looks ancient and gorgeous. None of that matters right now. You are heading toward the little ping, the map on your phone that tells you where your lecture hall is, and then you find the doors. Do you also, just like with Artemis, like gather yourself?
Oh,
like,
absolutely. Yeah, I have to stop. I have to straighten myself up, and then quietly as possible, as quiet as I can, open the door and try to like slide in and close it as quietly as possible.
The instant you start to open the door, you hear a loudest hinges. This place is old and they have not WD-40'd these hinges in a long time. And these doors are so noisy. They're ancient, old, heavy oak doors, so they make a lot of noise when you kind of bang them open. And you step into a Coliseum-style lecture hall. So they're tiered all the way down to a stage. There's no fewer than 200 students sitting in these elevated seats that trickle down to the very bottom. And as soon as the doors open with that horrific screech, every single one of those 200 pairs of eyes tears away from the in the middle of her sentence professor and fixes onto you. The professor cuts herself off in the middle of her sentence and glances over at you as well. You see an older black woman in a manual wheelchair. She is wearing a tailored suit jacket with elegant silver embroidery. Her eyes are dark, they're vivid, they're edging on maroon, and a pearl necklace adorns her collarbones, contrasting against her incredibly dark skin. And these long black locks travel all the way down to her waist and is pulled up into a half bun at the top of her head. This woman, this professor, is a vampire. So are about a quarter of the students in this lecture hall. You remember the professor's name from your calendar alert, a Toyin Ifueko. Professor Ifueko raises a perfectly manicured eyebrow in your direction and says in a voice that could cut steel, "Ah, Lumièra Nova, was it?"
Lumièra just stands there at the top of, in the back of the class, eyes wide as saucers, like looking almost like a fish, like her mouth opens to say something and then just immediately shuts back and does it a few times before, my most sincerest apologies.
Glad you could join us. 16 minutes and 2 seconds tardy. Have a seat and see me after class.
Lumièra immediately sits down in an available seat.
Yep, in the very back.
In the
right,
very back of the classroom.
Bam,
just
sit.
Sits down.
As you find your seat amidst the now whispering students, people are like looking back over their shoulders to kind of gawk at you. There's a sea of faces looking and staring and whispering, which is every socially anxious person's worst fucking nightmare.
Puts her head down, starts taking notes.
Yep. The professor turns her light brown gaze back toward the class, and thankfully they instantly shush. They stop talking. And Professor Ifueko says, as I was saying, the warrior poet Simran Ju of the 5th century opined, revenge is the fool's trophy, a catalyst only for destruction and malaise. But this could not be further from the truth. These past few weeks, I've given you all readings on a topic that connects our psychology with the world around us. Instinct. When we open ourselves to the neurotissue of lived experience, we learn that revenge is not merely a fool's trophy. Applied forcefully and intentionally, vengeance can be a powerful method for enacting change. Our literature students among us might remind us that revenge has many names: justice, closure, catharsis. We cannot moralize vengeance in simple strokes of black and white. Like hunger, thirst, and survival, vengeance is an instinct we must engage with to understand ourselves and ultimately each other. Like any other aspect of human psychology, our drive for vengeance is something we should seek to understand, not praise or condemn without nuance. And how do we seek to understand? And at that, the entire lecture hall chimes in with a single word: context. Lumièra, do you also chime in?
Of course. I did the reading.
Love this for you! Professor Ifueko smiles, and her near maroon eyes flash like chips of clouded blood as she speaks next. That's right. Context. The destruction and malaise that Zhu discusses comes not from the isolated act of or desire for vengeance itself, but from the context of his experiences and positionality, in his case, within the highly stratified monarchic feudal city-state society of 5th century Inferno. Our psychological need for justice, for closure, for catharsis is as natural as singing is to a shrike. However, as with any other part of our lived experience, we should inform our desires for vengeance within the context of the past and within our desires for the future. Lumièra, the next 90 minutes pass without much friction, thankfully. You sit, you attend the lecture, you take notes, and you learn. In fact, you learn quite a lot about the psychology of revenge, common myths, recent scientific studies, critical approaches to interrogating this subject. As you attend this lecture in a world you barely know, what memory springs to the surface of your mind?
I think Lumièra is taken back to her days training at Trans before she graduated. I think it more specifically, it takes her back to her first class in therapeutics. Where she finally was starting to pick at and find her specific calling. And that thirst for knowledge that's also interladen with something that's highly intriguing to her, a topic that is calling to her in some wild and interesting way. It's a reminder of back when things were good, or at least good for the time being.
It is then and only then that you are torn from your reverie. You can hear Professor Ifueko's voice ringing through the hall. We are approaching time here, scholars, so I will leave you with your next assignment. 3,000 words about the functions of revenge in the context of applied psychology by next Friday. If you need an extension, email me at least 24 hours in advance, otherwise no excuses. You are all dismissed. Except Miss Nova. Come.
Lumièra just packs up her book and her notebook and slides out of her chair, making her way down to the front of the class, not making eye contact, keeping her eyes directly on the floor in front of her.
Thankfully, the entire lecture hall scatters, so your walk of shame down to the bottom is kind of muddled within everyone gathering up their books, sliding laptops back into laptop bags, talking to each other, shooting the shit, and filtering out of the lecture hall. By the time you reach the bottom of the lecture hall, about half of the lecture has already emptied out, and you see Professor Ifueko gathering some of her notes from behind a low table that acts as her podium. And when she senses you approach, she looks up with those almost maroon eyes and an inscrutable expression on her face. She works as she talks, packing things up into her own book bags. Lumièra Nova, that's the first time you've been late this semester.
My deepest, again, and most sincerest apologies, Professor. There was something that came up prior to class with some of my family.
It would appear so. Not just your family, but yourself. The last time you were here, Miss Nova, you weren't a vampire.
I beg your pardon?
At this point, enough of the lecture hall has filtered out that it's just the two of you and a few stragglers, and she's speaking quietly but casually enough that no one else pricks their ears and turns their heads in your direction. This entire semester, Miss Nova, you've been hiding from me, in the middle of the pack here. Your essays have been adequate, if lacking passion. Adequate, yes. A's, of course, but not A+. But now you've come in late, and you've come alive, in a sense of the word. Excusing my puerile verbal gymnastics here, we both know we're not strictly alive.
Of course. Like I said, a lot of things have arose since we've last seen each other. I will make sure nothing will stand in the way of my education again. I hate to be an interruption to your class. It's one of my favorites.
You were an interruption, but a welcome one. Miss Nova, the entire city is buzzing about you and your family. It has not escaped my notice.
Buzz?
Just buzzing. Whether it's good or bad remains to be seen, and of course exists within the context of who's saying it's good and bad. But I have heard word of the young woman who saved the littlest spider from certain doom. You.
I was just in the right place at the right time.
Time will tell. Who are you, Miss Nova?
I'm Lumièra Nova. I'm a grad student here studying pre-med. I'm not sure what else you expected.
Pre-med, the healing arts. Is that your calling? Your passion?
One could say.
One could say. Is that why you saved the littlest spider? Your calling as a healer to do no harm.
Like I said, right place, right time.
Right place, right time. I'm not sure I believe that, Miss Nova. Well, the right place, right time I do believe. Your passion for the healing arts? I'm not sold.
Are you questioning my skills?
No. I'm questioning your passion. I'm questioning your assertion that it is your calling.
Well, I certainly wouldn't be in this class if I didn't.
Of course not. But there are many things many of us do simply because we are expected to do them.
Are you saying that higher education is what I'm expected of doing? Therefore, that's why I want to do it?
Is it?
No. I desire knowledge. I don't believe learning stops once you reach a certain age. Every day you wake up, every day is a gift. You take that. It is your duty to learn more. Why wouldn't you, if given the opportunity?
I completely agree with you, Miss Nova. Learning and knowledge is a lifelong journey. But what we choose to learn and why we learn are just as important as the masks we put on. And I think you are wearing a mask with me, Miss Nova.
Well, Professor Wake, if I'm wearing a mask, pray tell, what do you think it is?
I think you are wearing the mask of someone you think you should be. There are pressures on you. There are pressures on all of us, of course, but there are pressures on you, Miss Nova, and there is something deeper inside of you, is there not?
Why wouldn't there be? And Lumièra is, for what it's worth, she was very cool and calm and collected in the beginning. But the more she pulls, the more thread she pulls at from Lumièra's story, the more it starts to unravel just a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And she starts to get uneasy on her feet, clicking her pocket watch, fidgeting.
And Professor Ifueko has finished packing all her things up into her bag. She wheels herself around the table, so she's looking at you, and there's only a foot or two of distance between the two of you. She has a very curious look on her face, like a fox that's seen a rabbit in the middle of a dense wood and isn't sure if it wants to snap it up, or play with it, or do something else, something that you haven't quite figured out yet. And Professor Ifueko says, Miss Nova, I know what it's like to force oneself to be someone else, just to make someone else or something else happy or satisfied. I spent much of my misguided youth trying to please other people, and stifling that spark within me that I always knew was there but never always had the name for. But now I know who I am, and I have been, thankfully, unapologetically myself for many long years. It is a wonderful thing to get to be who you are.
Lumièra looks at her for a very long time. Almost an uncomfortable silence sits between them for quite a bit. Lumièra's body posture kind of slackens a bit. Well, if you're done psychoanalyzing me and my purpose, maybe it's time for you. It
Time
can
for
go
me
both ways.
to be
now.
psychoanalyzed by you, Miss Nova. You must excuse my tendencies. As the chair of the psychology department, I do sometimes slip into old habits.
Yeah. Like the ones where you try to tell someone that you very barely know what it is about them.
I do not tell people who they are, I simply observe.
Mm.
I take information that is presented to me and I deduce.
I've
I do not
presented
think.
this information.
There are more ways than one to present information. The micro-expressions of your face, for one. The way you hold yourself, the way you stiffened when I mentioned there was something deeper. The way you seemed to lean in when I told you, shared with you an intimate part of my own backstory.
My apologies, Professor. Sometimes I lash out when there are things that I don't understand.
Oh, no, Miss Nova. No apology is necessary. And I know how I can come off. Some students are rather frightened of me. They're intimidated by my ability to see, to understand, to observe. But I have a feeling you know what that's like, don't you, Miss Nova? Because you, I can tell, now that you've come alive, you have a frighteningly intelligent mind, don't you? A sharp one.
Not to toot my own horn.
And when she laughs and smiles, you see those sharpened fangs glimmering like an assassin's blade. You have questions for me, I assume.
A plethora.
Please, ask away. And Lumièra, as you dig deep for those questions, we pan out of this lecture hall. We hold on that almost full moon. And when we pan back down again, in the bloody beating heart of the city, we see the Temple of Inferno. It is a towering pagoda with 5 tiled roofs of glazed ceramic. The roof on the bottom is the largest and broadest, fanning out like a dragon's frill, supported by a dozen red painted pillars. A soaring minaret juts from the top of this temple, complete with a wooden balcony for holy folk to sound the call to prayer. The entire temple sits upon a raised stone dais, dozens of feet across. At this late hour, only a few faithful devotees traffic in and out of this pagoda, clutching prayer beads, lighting incense in giant bronze censers, and bowing shaved heads in each of the 4 directions. We push in on you, Seir, striding into this pagoda beside Ying He. The ground floor is massive and circular, with a vaulted ceiling and a magnificent shrine in the center, filled with golden carvings of various divine likenesses, along with offerings of fruits, coins, and prayer papers. A few monks attend to this shrine, garbed in simple robes of rich white, deep black, and blood red. Other devotees pray in front of various altars, their eyes closed and fingers steepled, but one person stands out to both of you. They are currently kneeling in front of the largest shrine here, their long black hair flowing freely down their back. They wear the colors of a monk, but their robes are slimmer, more modern, similar to the street-style hanfu that Ying He is wearing. A black huadian glimmers against light brown skin, and although their eyes are closed while they pray, the ghost of a smile flickers at their lips the entire time. And they look extremely young. They are definitely the youngest monk here. Most certainly, maybe even younger than the two of you, early 20s at most. A service dog sits attentively beside them, wearing a harness of white, black, and red. It's a large mutt. Its brown fur is flecked with black and white, and an ear kind of flicks in your direction as you enter, but its muzzle stays fixed in its owner's direction. Seir, aside from the two of you, there's only one other vampire in this entire shrine. This person. Ying He pauses at the threshold of the temple, taking all of the sin, smelling the incense. So, here we are.
Here we are indeed. Seir, throughout the entire walk here, I believe the walk with Ying He has been silent.
Yep.
He is quietly, between the silence, Seir's mind has been preoccupied with Xainan's words about acting on feelings he knows exists, his concern about Ying He's in access to their abilities they've known their whole life. He's worried about them, and he wants to be there for them. And that instinct takes over. And as he notices the silence between us, they wonder to themselves, wow, I guess I must have really upset them. And I need to make amends. And the best way Seir knows how to make amends is to show up. So before we cross the threshold, Seir will take note of any sort of like entrance rituals or like general must-dos as we enter into the sacred space. And one thing that he will do anyway is take his long hair and tie it up into a bun within his own hair that sits on top of his head to keep his hair out of the way and more neat, respectful. And as he does so, he turns over to the person and says to Ying He in a quiet, hushed tone, them, like us.
I can tell they're also a vampire. Maybe they can lead us to the abbot.
I'll go ask. And Seir starts approaching. He mostly pays attention to not only the body language of the person, but also the body language of their service dog. He has seen other members of Trans who also have companion animals who aid them in their day-to-day tasks for whatever alert or whatever function that they work in. And so Seir looks towards the dog, looks towards this person, and waits for a moment for when their task of prayer or of meditation is complete, he is there and he is ready to announce himself.
You stand a respectful distance, but close enough to signal to this person that you want to talk to them as they finish their ritual here. And it will take a long time, Seir. It will take quite some time. They are deep in some sort of prayer. You see their lips moving against their palms, but you can't catch the words coming out. Their dog is completely relaxed, looks at you as you draw closer, but then kind of looks away disinterestedly.
That's fair.
Is that attention for their owner?
And Seir waits patiently, heeding the warning that Rhododendron had given him not that long ago about being more respectful, especially in a space which has some level of orthodoxy. But in the respectful distance, he attempts to talk to Ying He.
Yeah, Ying He has drawn up next to you as you were like, I'm gonna talk to this person, and then you stop and you don't because you're giving them space. So Ying He draws up next to you and says, Are we gonna talk to them, or?
don't really want to interrupt them in the middle of meditation or prayer.
Oh, right. Maybe I
I mean,
shouldn't either. Should we just stay here? I feel like they can hear us.
yeah, I think so too. And Seir like pauses, like there's this kind of like pregnant, awkward pause that sits in the air for a little while before he just says, "What happened to your shadows?"
Well, I still cast a shadow, obviously. And I still feel connected to my shadow and the shadows here, but they don't move. They don't speak like I'm used to. It's just different. It feels more limited.
Like you're being cut off?
Maybe. Or maybe the magic. And they like whisper that to you. Of this place is just lesser than the one on Zhiguang.
Seir softens a little bit, and he, like, in this communication, and as Ying He whispers, he leans even lower, so they don't have to, like, harsh whisper so harshly towards his ear. He leans down closer to them, and he says, I've been feeling the same thing with my omens.
You have? Have you received any omens since you've been here?
No. None.
I see.
I
don't
feel
like
it
this.
just at the periphery, like it's behind some wall. But I can't do anything about it. Spent all my life not wanting to deal with omens, and yet here I am wanting to hear them. Ironic, isn't it?
I can relate. I spent a really, really long time hating myself for being able to connect with shadows the way I do because people were scared of it. But now I miss it. It's a part of me. And I've never been able to not go home when I want to, or step into shadow and disappear. It's, I don't know, like a cloak that makes me feel safe, and I don't have it here. It's frightening.
I know. And Seir says that not as an indication of him knowing that Ying He is afraid, but in a way of acknowledging that he too is afraid. And I think that is a tiny thing that slips out unintentionally from Seir, as his guard is down around Ying He. And hearing that Ying He can't go back, he stiffens a little bit. Do you want to? Go home, I mean. Do you regret coming here?
No, I don't. I would just obviously like to have the option to go home whenever I wanted to. And I don't regret coming here. But, Sarah, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about. A stag and a crane walk through the wood together. And this person slowly rises, their modern robes rippling silently as they do one last bow toward the shrine, and they turn to face the two of you. You see soft black eyes brimming with warmth. Greetings.
Hello. I'm sorry to interrupt your prayer.
No interruptions, and you did not. I was able to finish my sutra.
We were hoping we could speak to you about magic. We were recommended to seek our answers here when we visited House Drakar.
House Drakar, and they sent you into the House of the Serpent. I see. We were wondering if you would be so kind as to point us in the direction of the abbot? You are looking at them.
Seir does narrow his brow in a surprised fashion. He was not expecting this person to be an abbot. Maybe I mean, they clearly are devoted to their work. Maybe an apprentice to the abbot, but not the abbot themselves. And he just says, sorry? What?
I am Tsing, the abbot of House Ula.
Oh.
Oh. I think you and Ying say that at the same time. Ying looks to the side where we see older monks with shaved heads and humble robes, and then back at Tsing, who has these this modern streetwear. They don't have a shaved head. They're kind of just looking at you and smiling vaguely.
That works out. Hello, Abbot. Then
Hello.
it seems that fate has brought us together.
It does seem that fate has done so. Fate is interesting in that way. Nothing is ever a coincidence.
And Seir, in the back of his mind, says it's certainly in his mind's eye. It's just it certainly feels that way because that's been his whole experience in Inferno thus far. And he steps forward with Ying He and says, We've had connections to something greater, and it feels like we don't anymore. And we don't know if that's something you'd know something about, or... It doesn't seem like magic is something folks talk about, I suppose is what I'm trying to say.
Magic. Now that's an interesting concept, Seir. You had not introduced yourself.
Yeah. And Seir's just I didn't... How did you know my name?
Word travels fast here in Inferno. Many people whispering about what happened at the bloodbath last night.
Oh.
Or maybe I'm psychic.
Are
Just
you?
kidding. Well, speaking of telepathy, who is to say what's magic and what's not, don't you think? I've read fascinating and entertaining stories of fiction about dragons breathing fire and mages parting rivers. Of course, no such feats are possible in our mundane little world. Seir, as the abbot speaks, their words resonate with your experiences specifically on Earth. The mission briefing for Earth mentioned it was a low magic world, and sure enough, you weren't able to explode stuff or consume or destroy the way you were used to back at Trans. And how you felt on Earth starting to mirror and resonate with how you feel here in Inferno. Artemis had even mentioned that this too was a low magic world. And until very recently, you didn't have a name for the magic that dwelled within you. Now you do. Doom. In the Wild Sea, Doom came to you as fire, hot and blue, roiling out of your body in uncontrollable waves. In the City of Heaven, Doom came to you as hunger, insatiable and cruel, feasting your fangs on the flesh of a god. Here, you're not sure what Doom is, at least not yet. The few times you've attempted to wield it haven't worked, or have backfired, because you haven't figured out the proper way to call on it here. Your magic, your Doom, works differently. Differently, that's what Ying He has been saying this whole time, it works differently. Maybe you just need to figure out how.
Seir kind of ponders and actually leans a little more into his experiences on Earth a little bit. It was a low magic world, but Doom did happen. Seir listened to a part of himself, and he opened a door. And that door opened other doors, other portals, other places.
And
and
Kimani all the way.
caused everything
Yeah.
that yes, Kimani, yes, so astute, Connie. Yes, Kimani got away, and we
Who's Connie?
failed
I'm the
that
voice of
mission.
God.
And as Seir lingers on that, then he just says, "So how do House Ula look at magic then? At the way the world functions? How does your devotion manifest here?"
Well, perhaps our world isn't as mundane as we think. After all, the three of us here are living proof that something out there exists, or rather, we are unliving proof. We may not be able to breathe fire or part rivers, but we can perform extraordinary feats. As vampires, we are stronger, faster, more perceptive than our mortal bedfellows. We are also each endowed with a dark gift. Some of us can shrug off blows that would kill a fellow undead. Others can read minds or bend wills. Some of us think of our vampirism as a curse. And indeed, in many ways, it is. It is a curse of the blood that robs us of our mortality and inflicts a never-ending thirst upon our faculties. But in many other ways, our vampirism is a blessing. I like to think of it as both. Well, no matter your take on this, Seir, you cannot adequately access your gifts if you are thirsty. That is why we must drink blood. Any living blood will do, unless your dark gift makes you crave the blood of your fellow undead. But the best
can do that?
kind of blood... Yes, of course it can. Why ever not?
Oh,
It can do
okay.
many things. Many things indeed. I'm sure it's able to do things that I've not even heard of yet. Regardless, the most satiating type of blood is that which suits your particular proclivities. You see, some undead enjoy hot, athletic, risk-taking blood. Others enjoy taking from the devout or the faithful. Still others enjoy the blood of artists, creatives, imaginaries. Takes a little experimenting to figure out your blood type, but I've learned that deep down, we all know.
Oh. And Seir turns to Ying He to see how Ying He is reacting to all of this.
Ying He is nodding very intently. You get the feeling they're also realizing that their magic, because it's working differently here, things are sliding into place and they almost look relieved. Like they have an answer for how they can make their magic flare up again. They're nodding intensely. I see. Thank you, Abbot. That is very helpful. You're welcome.
So it is just trial and error then, Abbot? You just...
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Right. And Seir starts mapping in his little head about all the different hunts he needs to go with Ying He to like just narrow down what the blood type is. And he like nods to himself, making this plan in his head. You said that we vampires do know it deep inside. Is that instinct, I suppose?
Yes. Yes, of course. Deep down inside, we all know what really makes our blood run. It might take some experimenting, but I don't think it's a good idea to try to lie to ourselves about what we prefer. There is a difference between want and need.
All right. And he turns to Ying He and is like, all right, I think we have a path forward.
I think so too. Thank you again, Abbot. We had a few other questions. And he glances at you sideways because now it's time for politicking and they're not really sure where to go.
Ying He sees Seir and Seir like I think forgot that we were here for another thing and to talk about politics. And he looks at Ying He like and then realizes what that eye look is for. He goes, yes. Abbot, thank you. for your guidance and help.
Of course.
Ying, and I think Seir was about to say, my friend Ying He and I have a path forward. But we have some other questions about this place, Inferno, and the Crimson Tapestry.
Please ask away. I am an open book.
Seir looks around. How secluded are we?
Well, it is a large temple, and your words have... The abbot has not been trying to whisper. When they've talked about vampirism and gifts, like, their words echo out, but none of the monks or the devotees here seem surprised at all. They just continue going about their work.
Would this be an appropriate place to speak in private, Abbot?
Of course.
All right. We are curious about the history of Lanius and Thrakar. We know that House Ula is old and ancient. Perhaps you could illuminate more about this story of mutual hatred and betrayal.
It's a very curious question that you're asking me, little dear. Especially since you helped your friends save the second life, of the littlest spider. I would assume that you and House Thrakar would be on good terms, and that they would have told you the truth of the feud between Lanius and Thrakar. Are you not satisfied with the truth?
Just curious if there's more that is hidden. Not intentionally, perhaps. Sometimes anger, when left to fester, clouds
Alternate
one's
perspectives.
perspectives.
Yes, anger, like all emotion, can cloud our judgment. Here's what I will say about the tragedy of the Shrike and the Spider. These are two noble houses, both great and wonderful. But I'm afraid that their feud goes back longer than even I myself have been alive for. Well, alive twice for. The origins, the true origins of why they despise each other so is lost to time. Each of the heads of each household has their particular perspective on what they think happened. But it is one thing to pass a story down to your children, and another thing to have it written down in a history book, which unfortunately, it never was. What really matters is that they don't like each other. They never have, and I don't think they ever will. It's fate's will.
Seir, chews on that for a little bit before following up with, understood. How does House Ula view this antagonism between the two houses, and how does that affect your way of moving about the Crimson Tapestry around Inferno?
My responsibility as the abbot is to serve as a spiritual guide for mortals and undead alike in Inferno. My greatest goal here is to simply preserve things as they are, as fate has intended. I do not crave power, nor gold, nor change, simply for things to remain in balance the way they should be, the way they always have been, and the way they always will be.
All right. And Seir kind of chews on that and turns over to Ying He. Do you have any questions, Ying He?
Yes, I do have a question, actually, Abbot. I hope you do not take this the wrong way. But I got the impression recently that maybe Thrakar and Ula don't love each other. Thoughts?
Seir looks to Ying He and is like nodding approvingly because he thought that was the best way that could come out.
And Ting Sing smiles and says, very perceptive and very straightforward, the both of you. You won't last long here at Inferno if you keep shooting that way. But your gut instinct is right. There is some bad blood, if you will pardon the pun, between House Trakar and House Ula. In fact, House Ula used to just be one person, myself, and I used to be a spider.
Oh.
Xainan, you have been washing dishes for hours and hours and hours, and you have not been allowed to use gloves. The hot, hot, hot water of the sink swarms your eyes. Steam and sweat beads on your cold, dead skin. Gross food. I won't get too descriptive about it, but it's gross and nasty and you gotta touch it. Orders go out, empty or partially empty plates come back in, and Anu, when you're not washing dishes, makes you sweep, makes you mop, makes you clean the counters, makes you scrub down stains. So what unenviable kitchen task do we find you in the midst of when we come back to you?
I think Xainan is actively scraping like an old like trying to get any of the residual oil that's cooked into the sides of a wok out. And he is,
That's
you know,
torture,
when it's really in there and he's
Yeah.
just working at it, but strangely he is smiling.
Yeah, you're grinning as you put like elbow grease in and you're just scrub, scrub, scrub. The water's going, that music is blasting. There's a lot of stuff happening right now, a lot of sensory information coming in at you, that it is quite a wonder that you're able to hear what happens next because it is quite loud. Staggering in to the Lazy Bear Pub and Grill is a fellow vampire, and they are breathing heavily. You don't see them, but you hear it. The door bangs open, you sense an undead presence come in, and groans of pain, some sort of thud as like a body hits a wall. I Sakti Anu! And the music gets cut off immediately as Anu, who was doing another chore somewhere else in the kitchen, presses pause on the playlist and like bustles out of the kitchen. Do you follow? Or do you keep doing your task?
Yeah, I think Xainan brings the wok with him, like dripping water as he goes. Just kind of like, yes, I'm still working, not at all being very nosy. And as he does, he's also, again, limping. And like, it's not quiet. It's not subtle.
And thankfully, no one is paying any attention to you as all eyes are fixed on this newcomer that just came in. Slumped against the wall of the diner, you see a 30-something-year-old vampire. She is grabbing onto one of her arms with the other, steadying it because it is bent in an unnatural direction, and her undead blood is staining the entire sleeve. She's like whimpering in pain. Something was able to break the arm of a vampire. More than that, gash it open. And the woman that had been in the booth smoking cigarettes this whole time, who had ignored you when you came in, she springs into action. She is no longer in the booth. She immediately has an arm around this person and is like pulling her into the booth. Everyone else in this diner like gets the fuck out. At one look from this woman's eyes, they get the fuck out. So it's just you, Anu, this woman, and this injured vampire. And this injured vampire is saying, I'm sorry, Zakti, I got all fucked up for no reason, really. I just didn't... my own damn fault. Calm down, Kelliga. Arm. Show it to me. And this person, Kelliga, painfully places their arm forward as this other woman, Sakti, which you recall was the name of the mogul, peels, like rips that ruptured sleeve away to reveal like a completely broken arm, bone showing, but more than that, you see huge bite marks around the entire like rotator cuff down to the elbow, and it even like mashes into her pectoral, like something with a huge mouth the size of like a fucking truck.
Xainan sees all this, stops scrubbing. He was only kind of scrubbing by the time he got there, But two things distract him. One, seeing Sakti work and all of the actual healing attempt, pulling away all of the damage and to get a good look at the injury, but also the air smells more delicious than any food that's been in here the moment that Cai enters. And his mouth is almost watering, and that hunger begins to rise in him as he can smell the blood of another vampire.
Mm-hmm. As you stand watching that hunger and thirst rising in you, Sakti very calmly, like assessing this broken limb, barks out, "Anu, the usual." And Anu just nods and quickly gets back into the kitchen and starts making something. As she's doing that, Sakti, you see, like, takes the cigarette out of her mouth and puts it into Cai's, and says, "Need anything else to bite down on?" "No. Do it. Just fucking do it." Crunch! As Sakti just cracks the bone back in place.
Xainan is taken back to another life, seeing a similar scene just for a flash. People sitting around in a barn, setting a bone, and he's back in this diner.
There's a horrific sound as this injured vampire wails and grunts and growls. Ugh! Now tears, blood tears, are beading at the corners of her eyes from just the sheer pain of it. She looks like she's about to pass out. But then Anu comes out from around the kitchen and places two things down in front of this injured vampire. One of them is a stein of hot, piping hot blood, like a beer stein, but it's full of crimson liquid. And the other is a burger, as far as you can tell, but the patty on the inside is raw, completely raw, and there's been something done with it. It smells really good to you, unlike human food, which just kind of smells like ash. And immediately this vampire starts just they like completely chug the blood and they slam it down and they start tearing into this burger. As Sakti, you notice, pulls out like a first aid kit and starts like attending to their wounds. As they do, Cai says, "So I guess rumors of a hungry wolf aren't just rumors. They came out of nowhere. I don't think they were in their right mind. I think they were just hungry. They didn't do this on purpose. My own damn fault. I wanted to find out more, so I stayed longer than I should have, and It's okay, Cai. Just calm down. We'll learn more about this later. For now, just focus on healing." Okay. And they stop talking. They like just keep eating and drinking.
As Xainan watches this, and he hears the hungry wolf, a predator, something hungry enough to attack a vampire, he doesn't realize where it comes from, but he looks down and a bullet falls onto the ground. And he looks down at it confused.
The clinking of this bullet draws Sakti's attention. She has set the bone, and before your very eyes, as soon as that like empty stein clatters back down, you see the flesh start to knit itself back up again. This vampiric healing happening as blood kind of craters in like lava into cracked open earth, flesh flowing in, skin stitching back together. And Sakti raises those eyes, those sharp, intense, at first uninterested eyes, now glimmering with curiosity, looking back up at you and says, "This is what it means to take care of our own, Xainan Esch. That's what the House of the Bear does. We watch out for our den."
Xainan nods quietly. There's a familiarity. He's never met Sakti before. He's never been a bear. But there's a sense of home that he hasn't felt in a very long time in the way that Sakti talks about House Kuatun. And he just nods. Understood.
Anu, And Sakti jerks her head. Anu raises her eyebrows and opens her mouth as if she's about to argue, but at a look from Sakti, just closes her mouth, rummages around in the kitchen again, and when she comes back out, she has a smaller stein of blood for you. She hands it to you.
Xainan takes it, but looks kind of confused. But why?
And Sakti says, without looking at you, still tending to that wound, making sure Kaleg is okay, she says, "You might not be a bear, but you're helping us out right now. And if there's one thing bears are, it's hospitable. There are certain rules to being a host and rules to being a guest. No guest that walks into one of our restaurants, into one of our dens, is ever going to go hungry. Because the price of hunger..." And she trails off and just looks down and gestures at that wound still stitching up.
Yeah. Appreciating the gesture for more than just hospitality. The giving of a resource is a gesture that Xainan understands very profoundly. And the lone survivor of Kaseki takes the mug and drinks, grateful.
The blood touches your lips, and it spills down your throat. Lumièra. The professor looks up at you with curiosity, interest, and just a hint of challenge in her eyes. She doesn't want you to hold back, as she invites you to ask your questions. What is the first query that comes out of you?
What exactly is the relationship between House Huyen and House Rakar?
Swinging out of the gate now, are we? Well, here's what I can tell you, Miss Nova. Our interests are aligned.
How so?
House Rakar is interested in changing Inferno, uniting it, to my understanding. And you see, art and education are natural allies. Both myself and Willow are interested in progress. We are interested in creativity. We are interested in innovation. And I believe that by working together, we might get to places that a single house could not.
So like a united ticket front? Combining sources together for the betterment of the whole?
Yes, something like that. House Rakar is quite content on driving this innovation. Certain promises have been made about House Huyen's place in the new United Inferno.
More power than what all the knowledge in the world can already give?
Knowledge and power are one and the same. But by itself, knowledge accomplishes nothing. It is what you do with it that matters.
And what is it that you plan to do with it, Professor?
Create a world that has not yet been known. But right now, the way that Inferno currently works under the Crimson Tapestry, there are certain checks and balances that stifle that innovation.
So you want the freedom to choose, and the freedom to learn.
Precisely. Yes, exactly. Clever girl.
Lumièra kind of blushes at the soft stroke of her intellect, but that's something to unpack for a later date. And she just smiles. Well, I was personally recommended to you from Rothrakar. We're working together seems so frivol of a statement. It's more like I'm scratching their back and they scratch mine.
That is the foundation of all great alliances throughout history.
Fair
Mutually beneficial arrangements. There's quite a lot of literature on the psychology of that.
Much like the psychology of revenge.
Precisely. Alliances and vengeances are quite similar in a lot of ways. They are both dependent on another party. And they both produce cycles.
Cycles.
Yes, when it comes to vengeance, of course, it is cycles of destruction, rage, and pain if you allow that vengeance to consume you. Or, as we learned today during my lecture, if you apply it contextually and intentionally, it can help bring catharsis and usher in a new era. As for alliances, it is a mutually beneficial cycle. The more you help each other, the more the other is inclined to help you, so on and so forth. As humans and as vampires, we are instinctually motivated to be in community with each other. We are pack animals, one might say.
Yeah. A pack.
A pack, a house. Different names for the same thing.
Family. They all lie in together.
Precisely. Speaking of which, since you are scratching Rhododendron's back and Rhododendron is scratching yours, perhaps you could help me scratch my back here, and perhaps I could scratch yours as well.
Lumièra's eyes quirk at that. How so, Professor?
There is one specific kind of mutually beneficial arrangement that I believe will solidify the alliance between houses Huyen and Thrakar. It is something I've been considering, a way to assure Thrakar's promises, make sure they are not just dust in the wind.
Well, from what I've seen so far, Thrakar is very diligent about keeping their promises, but I'll bite. What is it?
If you will be so kind, Miss Nova, I would appreciate you passing along this message to Rhododendron Thrakar about that which House Huyen craves to solidify our bond. You see, I have a daughter, and I believe that she and the littlest spider should be wed. I would like our houses to be joined. And we're going to end the session there. Thank you all so much for tuning in so far. I've been Connie, your GM, and the proprietor of an arranged marriage. My pronouns are they, he, and she. I'm going to pass along introductions over to Valiant Dorian.
Oh, okay. Hi. Just let me pick my jaw off of the floor for a second. Hi everyone, I'm Valiant Dorian. I use his pronouns. You can find me all around the internet, Valiant Dorian. Or also Spirit Bear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure I just set you on. Tonight I had the distinct pleasure of playing your messy boy Seir, who uses he, they pronouns. He's trying his best. But on to the pop-up of the hour. Hey, little bear, how's it going?
Oh, you know, having a great time. Hi, everyone. I'm Kai. You can find me all over the internet as Estelle of Ibladris. And boy, did I have a fun time playing the bottom of Strike Team Nova, Mr. Xainan Esch.
That is exactly what you are.
You are correct, and you should say
Yes.
it louder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as he deserves. Sam.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Star once again, using she, they, and the occasional they pronouns. You can catch me all across the interwebs at Lust for Life X, more specifically on Blue Sky, because I am completely phasing out that other hell site. And yeah, I played Lumièra. Who doesn't love a hot professor? I know I do. Passing it along to our lovely special guest. Ha! Got it!
I thought you were going to pass it along to me. I forgot how I came back from the
You
introduction.
forget I'm here.
I forgot. I couldn't see. I was like, it's gonna be me.
Right. How could you do that? Oh gosh. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Hamna. I use any and all pronouns, and I am a TTRPG performer and producer. You can find me all over the internet at Lilith TTRPG. I am also specifically on Blue Sky the most right now. So if you like what I do, you should go follow me there because I've got a few shows kind of in my back pocket that are going to be coming out soon that you should keep your eye on. But yeah, it has been a pleasure to. I don't know what. A lot happened. I'm going to let Connie take it.
It's a me, Connie, taking it. I hope.
Nope.
Stop! Anyway, thank you all so much for tuning into this deeply feral episode of the Chaos Protocol. If you're laughing, I'll see you in court. If you enjoyed what you saw here tonight, consider leaving us a positive review, joining the Discord server, or posting about us on social media. Not only does it help our creator brains when we're on the verge of burnout, which I constantly am, it also helps us continue to reach out to sponsors to make this work possible. If they see that people watch our stuff, they're going to want to throw money at us to keep making the stuff. That's how it works, I guess. Chaos is back for good. So join us next Saturday, January 18th at 8 p.m. US Eastern Time to find, for the next installment of Arc 3, maybe we'll finally discover what the hell that marriage proposal means. And what's happening with everyone else on their scenes. Werewolves? Anyway, stick around for the raid, and we will be here, right back here next week, same time, same place. Journey well, translators. Send your love to the raid. Howdy, translators. You know what time it is. It's sponsor Connie time with a word from Hero Forge. Hero Forge has officially leveled up with kit bashing. When you become a pro member, you can place up to 20 more items anywhere on one of your blorbos with their own independent scaling, rotation, and movement. You can make your character look exactly as they should, even if the specific clothing or accessory option isn't available at the base level. You just have to get a little creative. And because I love you, transplaners, here's a special sneak peek at a kit-bashed version of Oblivion. Just look at those wings and that base. This would not be possible without the power of kit bashing. The combinations are literally endless, and you can print your kit bashed blorbos as plastic minis, standees, digital STL files, or even Hero Forge's brand new color statuettes. Color statuettes are twice the size of a regular mini, and just look at this. I mean, look how massive this is, and especially in comparison to a regular mini, you can really get into all the nooks and crannies and details that wouldn't be as apparent on a regular sized mini. Just look at how Oblivion dwarfs Oka here. And also, if you're a GM, consider busting out one of these bad boys during a boss fight to really get your players shaking in their boots. Oblivion agrees. Unlock the true power of Hero Forge with a Hero Forge Pro subscription starting at $3.99 a month. Get in there and start creating at bit.ly/transforge. Now, let's get back to the show. Or more likely, just more of the waiting room. Trust in her will.